and welcome back to What a Barb, a Polin podcast. I'm Obs, and today I'm joined by Lecky and Veg as we continue our Season 3 Polin rewatch. Very sadly, Beans can't be with us for this episode. She went toe-to-toe the burrito and
lost.
She lost.
That's a very interesting way to phrase. She has a case of food poisoning and she's recovering.
Beans, if you hear this, I'm so sorry. We're not laughing at you. She's been in hospital all day. And
Yeah.
It's not funny.
Yeah.
By the time that you hear this, guys, it'll have been ages and ages ago. So she will be fine by the time that you hear this. But
yeah, her situation isn't funny, but the phrase toe-to-toe with a burrito, however, is.
That will not make an episode of Baking with Beans. So don't worry.
Oh, no.
She is okay, though, and she's with us in spirit. But I do have my lovely Lecky, my lovely Veg. How are you both doing? Lecky, how's it going?
I'm well.
Great. Glad to hear it.
Oh, my husband, I've got a story here.
Of course.
My husband and I are watching The Mole on Netflix, which is very Traders-esque. And it kind of reminds me, there used to be a show here in the States hosted by Craig Ferguson called The Hustler. It was like you had to figure out who was lying, but every episode there was like new people introduced. Whereas The Mole, it's a group of people and you're trying to find out who is lying over the length of a season. But unlike the Traders, you don't know who the liar is. But I like it because I feel like I spotted who the mole is when they were doing their initial interviews. So I'm really anxious to see if I was correct.
Oh,
When are you going to find out? Like, is it right at the end?
I think it'll be at the end, yeah.
I watched the first episode of, and it's basically like a grown-up version of, what was that show where they were all in a tower?
The Traders?
No.
Oh,
Different tower.
what did she say?
You are the saboteur.
It was like a child's thing.
Yeah, this was back in 2005.
Was it Trapped?
Trapped, that was it.
Oh, it was so good, Lecky. Honestly, if you like Traitors, this is like retro Traitors, but it's for kids.
Oh, that does sound interesting.
Well, Leck, if by the time you finish you want to make a podcast about it, you know who to call.
Well, I already have the Traders one in the works. I do not have a Traders podcast in the works, but if I did,
She would if she
I've
could.
watched pretty much all the international seasons now. We are working our way through the remaining Traders seasons.
If What a Barb goes offline, go searching for Traitors Pod and she'll be over there.
Well, I was going to say, this podcast has been a piece of cake, so second one, easy.
Yeah. If you are a fan of the Traders, highly recommend Norway season 2 and season 3. Those are the best so far.
I've heard good things about the Norwegian ones.
It's probably me, the only person who's telling you to keep watching the Norwegian version of the Traders.
I don't know why I was like, yeah, the word on the street is I'm not. He's like, you.
Yeah.
Well, Veg, how are you? You've got some exciting news.
Yes. Well, firstly, I have a bit of a cold, so if you hear me wheeze, we've tried our best to edit them out, but sorry about that.
Also, we're actually recording this episode in 2 parts. We're hopefully going to release it at the same time. But if Veg suddenly sounds really well,
If you notice any inconsistencies.
it's just because it was a week later.
Yeah.
Yeah. Apologies.
Anyway, yes, I have 2 little new friends with me.
2 new mascots.
Yes, there are 2 new podcast official cats, which is very exciting. I got a job offer that meant I can go in to the office less, so I was like, right, it's time. It's time. I'm going to care for things again.
I'm going to care for things again. What are their names?
Oh, they're 1 and 3, and they're a mum and a son.
Oh.
And I did strongly consider Penelope for the girl, but it feels like I've dedicated enough of my life to this show. No offense. Like, Pen has got a great level of representation in my life. It's fine.
Yeah, she's well supported on the pod.
Yeah. So I went down the musicals route and inspired by my top 2 favourite musicals, Waitress and Groundhog Day, I've gone with Dr. Pomater, which is character in Waitress, or Pom Pom, as I've been calling him.
Oh, Pom Pom.
Pom-Pom's cute.
That's really sweet.
Yeah. And for the girl from Groundhog Day, I've gone with Punks the Tawny Philippa, or Punks.
Punks is adorable.
But it's great because she has her own theme song.
So you've pushed Penelope aside and you've brought Philippa into the foray.
Yeah.
Where's the Prudence representation around here?
Yeah.
But yeah, very exciting, and I'm adapting well.
And they're settling in so well.
They are. I got them a week ago, and they're on the sofa right now.
Aw.
Cuddly.
Their owner had died, hadn't they? So you've
Yeah.
taken them in.
Yes, I've adopted. It's very fun.
Very sweet of you.
Very sweet. Well, bloody thrilled to have more cats in the pod. Always a joy. So glad to hear that you're both well. Beans, we're sending you hydrating thoughts wherever you may be.
Yeah.
But Lecky?
No, wait, I have something.
Ooh.
Yeah, my cats have just had a lovely second dinner, and there's a little mess on the floor. Lots of crumbs. Speaking of, Lucky.
Speaking of crumbs.
Do we have any breaking crumbs this week?
Let's go and see. So, in lieu of crumbs this week, we actually have a special segment we're calling What a Real Page Turner. If you've listened to our podcast for more than 5 minutes, actually, you'll know that we've always been so interested, not just in the story and the scenes and things like that, but how they were brought to life and tracing every detail from page to screen, post-production to the actual filming of the show and the creation of the world. And we recently had a chance to actually research some of the Bridgerton scripts directly, including the scripts from Bridgerton Season 3. And what we're going to do throughout our Rewatch series is we're going to lace some of these tidbits that we've learnt throughout our Rewatch as we go. So it's just sort of small little details, small little changes, moments that offer more light into some of the storytelling in the season. But I thought we'd take this little moment here to share some of the main takeaways that we've learnt. And also, first things first, just want to say, no major Polin scenes were cut.
Yes.
In fact, I don't think even minor Polin scenes were cut. It's like small line differences, or like we see in this episode where they reshot it.
Yeah.
But they were all there. They all made the cut. So congratulations, Pen and Colin. Well done. But what did we find, Lecky?
It was so interesting to see what didn't make the cut, though it is important to realize that what didn't make the final edit isn't canon, and it's not unusual for scenes to have been cut out of the final edit. Some of the scenes in dialogue we noticed were cut because they seemed a little bit on the nose or affected pacing and things like that. We also know that certain scenes were cut from prior seasons, such as the deleted Polin scene from 206, so this is nothing new.
Yeah, there's always been stuff cut. I think we've even heard about storylines with Anthony and the Duke being changed in season 1. We know that there were more scenes with Anthony and Sienna, so this is just standard practice for TV.
Yeah.
But to dive in, Lecky, you know Polin fans such as ourselves have long wondered what the hell was cut from that wedding scene in 206. Because in the behind the scenes, we were able to glimpse Luke, Nicola and Claudia rehearsing this scene. So it was just before Eloise was walking with Penelope, before they sort of talk about the torment of not knowing. And we knew there was a cut scene and we didn't know what happened.
Well, here's the answer. It is a very sweet little scene where Colin approaches Pen, who mentions that she and her sisters are wearing necklaces from Cousin Jack's mines. Colin then decides to lean in, asking, "May I?" as he takes a closer look at Pen's necklace. He does ask beforehand.
You know how much he loves gemstones.
Rubies.
You know how he has a fondness for rubies, after all.
Yeah, but Pen understandably freaks out. The scene description says, Colin leans in to examine Pen's necklace. Nothing untoward, but damn is Pen into the proximity. And Pen, she's very nervous, so she kind of stutters over her words, and she says, I'm not sure it suits me as well as it does Prudence. And Colin says, of course it does. It is quite beautiful. And the scene description says, did he just call her beautiful? Pen's flustered, only now Eloise is coming over to snatch Pen away.
So just a lovely, sweet, oblivious scene featuring oblivious Colin, our favourite. And also, that sort of sheds more light on when he references her exquisite necklace in 207.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Because I suppose in that moment, she's like, oh, you noticed my necklace?
Yeah.
Whereas in this scene, he very overtly noticed her necklace.
I kind of like that it was cut, because then we're left inferring that Colin was...
It's like, you were looking where?
Yeah. Yes, you know how much we love that.
I mean, I know those rubies were very prominent, Colin. So I'm glad to have the answers. I understand why it was cut, but just a little tidbit for you.
To go back a little bit further in time, when Penelope is watching Colin depart in 108, after Elle speculates that Pen is going to miss her father, Pen initially agreed and said that she would miss, quote, him, but it's clarified in the scene description that she's not talking about her dad. Her dad has just kicked the bucket, but Colin's absence is a bigger blow to her.
Definitely not crying over her dad.
Yeah.
You know what, girl, can't blame you. And Lecky, in the infamous heart eye scene, we don't get any insight into what was going on between Polin during those gazes. You know those gazes have long haunted us all. But adorably, Colin thinks about hugging Pen.
So it says, and the hugging finishes as Colin eyes Penelope because, well, should he hug her too? He goes to do it, only... And then he's interrupted by his siblings, sadly. It's also clarified that in 208, Colin is drunk when he makes the wildest fantasies comment. And it's hinted that he's kind of in a state of confusion about the relationship. At that point, he thinks they are friends, though he's not quite sure. The scene description says it's just they're friends, right? So the needle does seem to be moving a little bit in that scene.
That questioning.
And he's drunk, so... forgive him.
We forgive you, Colin. He's taking aback. And it's those moments where he isn't ready to be confronted by that kind of question. Whereas in this episode, we might see things are going to start to change. And then for season 3, there are many little moments that we'll try and reference in relevant episodes. But here are the highlights. Because, I mean, we've already done our 301 rewatch. So here are some moments from that are worth noting. On the way to the presentation with his brothers, there was a little bit of cut banter between Colin and Ben, where Colin kind of alluded to the idea that he now had experience with women. And basically, Ben pokes a little bit of fun at Colin for showing off his chest. And then Colin jokes that the only way to see chest is to disrobe like he is doing. Or you can admire people's necklaces, I guess.
So Ben says, showing some of your bosom this morning, are we, brother? And Colin says, how else would you ever see any? And Ben says, that's rich coming from you.
Ben is kind of shocked by this, I think, because he doesn't remember his little brother behaving like a rake or even really having experience at all.
The scene description says, Colin simply glances out the window, no need for a rebuttal. Benedict clocks a private smile that suggests he has no idea what he's talking about. Interesting.
It's kind of unclear if this was a reference to Colin originally being a virgin or maybe trying to raise questions in the viewers' minds about whether he was maybe less experienced than he let on.
I kind of wish they had left that in and kind of let us come to our own conclusions about how much experience he'd had on the continent and whether his one relationship was with the Contessa or maybe he had dalliances with other women or no women at all, perhaps.
We'll get our answers in this episode, don't you worry, like.
There's also a cut Benedict scene at the Livingston garden party where some lords kind of playfully tell Ben that this should be his season, as we all know it should have been. Benedict is kind of horrified by the idea and says he isn't interested in, quote, the torture and the melancholy that he'd experienced in Colin's shoes, before adding that he'd like to enjoy himself before he settles down. This, we think, foreshadows a very angsty season for Benedict. And of course, he does go on to enjoy himself a lot in season 3, as everyone knows.
And then at the Danbury Ball, let's head on over. There's a little cut scene that we've glimpsed in the behind-the-scenes footage of Lady Danbury greeting the Bridgertons.
Notably, Colin makes a remark about how winter can make one appreciate things anew. Is it not the cold of winter that makes us appreciate newly?
Which I think is a reference to how the absence of Pen's letters had a profound effect on him.
Oh.
And also a comment on the slightly bewildering timeline of exactly when Colin has been away.
In the scene, Lady Danbury also comments on how changed Colin is, and she seems to like the change that she sees in him. Kind of interesting.
We've loved every Colin. Don't listen to her, Colin. We've loved you in every iteration.
There's also some cut rakish dialogue from Colin, whose words falter as he catches sight of Penelope, looking ravishing indeed in her new gown. And he snaps out of it when Lord Stanton says, Mr. Bridgerton, Contessa got your tongue? And Colin replies, no, at least not yet. That comes later in the story. So very much behaving like a rake. Later at the ball, there's also a cut scene between Benedict and Elle where Ben deduces that Eloise isn't being her true self. And he guesses that she had her heart broken by someone she met during her stint as a political radical.
That's a leap.
Eloise agrees, but says that Pen's absence is more painful.
Oh, and that's kind of a parallel to Pen, because she's also had her heart broken by a guy. But it is the relationship with Elle that's still that open wound for her. And to carry on the train of cut Benedict moments, during the scene at Will's Bar, Anthony also urges Ben to take a more active role in society when he mentions his lack of purpose.
Anthony tells Benedict they are Bridgerton brothers, aka, quote, men of action, and says if he wants purpose, then why not say yes for once to society, to every new thing that comes your way, see where it leads you.
And this is the start of the siblings basically pushing him to interact with society women, which ends up leading to his love affair with Lady Tilly. So you can kind of see how that path goes out.
And for the final details for 301, in the apology scene, there is a cut line of dialogue during Colin's apology. After he says, you are clever and warm, and I am proud to call you my very good friend, he initially said, I deeply regret ever making you feel any other way. And then the scene description in the apology scene confirms that Pen was thinking kind of naughty thoughts after she tells Colin that he can't be whispering in her ear in ballrooms. The scene description clarifies the thought of him whispering in her ear sounds pretty damn sexy, which Nicola, of course, translated so well with her fluttering eyelashes in that scene. And also, it's pupil and tutor, not pupil and teacher, regarding Colin's cut line. The exchange goes, it is perhaps unusual, but are we not friends? And Penelope agrees and says, friends. And then it says, Colin leans in, close, more than that now, pupil and tutor. And he gives her a hearty handshake, one that will send these two forward into new territory, launching them toward their romance, all unbeknownst to them at this moment, of course.
But then for the big moments that didn't make the final cut this season and are therefore no longer canon, for Louise fans, you might be interested to know that Eloise had a meeting with Theo in season 3. It's kind of like how Colin went to visit Marina in season 2 and ended up receiving some much needed closure. Eloise visits Theo, who reveals he's married and urges her to use her privilege to continue fighting for the causes she believes in, which kind of propels her to go off and leave and expand her horizons at the end of the season, I think.
So Eloise goes to the printers, and footman John kind of amusingly expresses his concern upon their arrival, saying, "Not this part of town again." To which Eloise replies, "Sometimes we must revisit places we do not wish to go."
For Louise fans, Theo also makes a comment about his own marriage.
He says, "It was a quick match, but as one grows older, I suppose one knows what one is looking for more quickly."
Which very much reminded us of Louise and foreshadowing their love story together.
We also finally figured out who Ambrosia was. During Colin's stag party at White's, you may have glimpsed Fife and Wilding in the background. They are there because they play kind of a nasty trick on Colin.
Not my Fife.
Somewhat in the vein of season 1, where Simon is in the club where all of the women pour in, and Sienna propositions Simon. We get a similar scene here.
Don't panic, guys. I know what you're like. Stay with us. Stay with us here.
A bunch of women enter the club. One goes over and has a little chat with Fife and Wilding before coming onto Colin hard. She tries to appeal to his hero side and his desire to be needed, but he rebuffs her repeatedly, though there is a moment where the writers try to trick viewers into thinking he might give in. So basically, Ambrosia approaches Colin and says, "You're looking rather solitary," and Colin says, "I shall not be for long. I'm to be married tomorrow." As in, no thanks. But Ambrosia, of course, is undeterred. She says, "Well, a man should not drink by himself the night before he is to be leg shackled." Colin replies by saying, "Your concern is most appreciated, but is not necessary. I assure you there are plenty of other supposed gentlemen in here tonight who would be happy to make your acquaintance." And then Ambrosia kind of guesses that you aren't like the rest of them then. You're more thoughtful, kind, a lot running around in that head. And Colin turns toward her just slightly, not hating her words. Ambrosia then puts a hand on his leg and says, "You might be exactly the kind of man I need. Someone who will treat me well, someone who can take care of me, someone to protect me from the rest of these heathens. Will you?" And then the scene description says that she's really playing up her helplessness with that last bit, and as she says this, she runs her hands up Colin's leg, speaking to that part of him that wishes to be needed. Her hand is reaching up toward his manhood, and just before she gets there, Colin reaches down and puts his hand on her hand. Her eyes crackle with success, and for a moment we think it's on, but then he pushes her hand down and away. He says, "My guess is you can protect yourself. I should get home." And he goes. As he does, that helpless look Ambrosia was offering Colin settles back into a confident smirk as she circles back to Fife and Wilding. And then she points at Fife. It's revealed that Fife paid her to come on to Colin, and that Fife and Wilding were betting on the outcome of his seduction. Wilding, for what it's worth, didn't think Colin would go through with it. Fife, no surprise, is the true villain.
Now, it's a difficult moment, guys. It's a difficult moment for me. What I'll say? Not canon. Two
Right.
beautiful words.
Yeah.
Not canon.
Yeah.
Fanfic at this point.
Yeah.
Didn't happen. Not my Fife.
Like in 2-8, Nicola revealed that Fife was actually laughing at her
Didn't happen.
when Penn was dancing with Colin, and we didn't see that on screen. So, you know, you could take it either way.
Not my final edit, Lecky. Not my final. So, no, I won't hear it. Also, you have to remember that he is trapped within the confines of toxic masculinity. He's as much a victim as anyone. So, no. Although, I'm glad this didn't make the cut.
Yes. Yeah. I think we're all happy this one ended up on the cutting room floor.
Yeah, and Colin was never going to break in that moment, but I don't think
No.
he needed that at all the night before his wedding.
I think why it was included was because, as I said, she appeals to kind of his hero side and his need to be needed. And then he has that argument with Penelope where he's like, what good am I to you if I can't serve a purpose, if I can't help you?
Yeah.
So I think it was kind of setting up that argument where she conveys to him finally that she doesn't need anything from him, but for him to love her and be himself. But yeah. Better left on the cutting room floor.
Rough night. And then also, what a sting when she's like, oh, shall I ask where you've been then tonight?
Yeah.
And he's like, don't even start.
To be fair, he was just having drinks. He didn't know that they're literally called ladies of the night. We're going to flood into to the bar. He didn't know. He was just sitting there innocently having drinks on his stag night. It's the prostitutes who came to him. He didn't go to them.
This could have been averted had Will not closed his club.
That's true.
That's all I'm saying.
Yeah.
Well, also in 307, Genevieve finally shares a bit of backstory with Pen, revealing that a former French lover is the source of her fake French accent.
We've been wondering about that for so many seasons. I wish they had kept that in.
Well, I think they might have cut it because it's a little bit on the nose.
Yeah.
Also, I like the mystery of not really knowing.
I do.
A lady is entitled to her mysteries.
I would have liked to learn more about her. Maybe not the way she presents it here.
Yeah, I like the idea that she went out and developed that herself, but she reveals that her lover was jealous of her success, so there were very glaring parallels with the Polin relationship there. Also, in this scene, Jen revealed originally that she's now in a relationship with, and I'll give you a few seconds to place your bets. Who is Jen now, although not now, in a secret relationship with?
There are references to someone close to this character in this episode.
Who could it be? He's gone through a traumatic time. Let's get some galloping here.
Yeah.
How is he going to wipe away those heartbroken tears? It's Lord Basilio. And I'm just thinking, imagine the absolute mess had the horse not died and had that conversation with Penelope at the Osterley Ball gone really, really well.
Oh, yeah.
And they like really hit it off. And then
She goes to catch up with Jen.
Pen goes to Jen.
And she's like, hey, guess who?
And she's like, I need to place a new order because I've got this guy. I'm going to be a Viscountess. And she's like, what's his name? Lord Basilio.
Yeah.
Now, that's a different kind of show, but it's... But congrats, I guess. But Genevieve also asks Pen, or maybe tells her, don't you dare fucking mention this and whistle. If it gets out, I know way more about you than you know about me at this point.
This is a private gossip sesh. Earlier in part 2, Antony also has a talk with Fran about John at Polin's engagement party. He is concerned that John isn't right for Fran, and even compares John to, quote, Miss Edwina, saying that while he loves her, she's now part of their family unit, she was not the one for him. While Fran defends John and manages to convince Antony that she is in love, the scene description hints that this isn't the case and that she either does not love John or is still kind of uncomfortable with the idea of love. I will say I'm a bit sad that this was cut because Fran makes a very beautiful speech about the qualities she does love about John, saying, John is quiet, but when every other suitor was talking at me, John was the only one listening. I enjoy his modest humor and the fact that he attends our assemblies even though he knows he does not quite fit in here. I know that his reticence may make him seem impenetrable, but to me, it is the silence that allows me to find him and to feel found myself.
Oh, I don't know. I'm kind of glad it didn't make it. I think we've been through enough.
I think another reason I like it is because it's very much the scene in season 2 where Daphne kind of gives love advice to Antony, and this is Antony passing it on to another sibling. And I really would have loved more Antony moments where he's interacting with his siblings like that. It's a bit sad that it was cut.
Did this fall in between the two Muddy Boot stories, or did it fall after the Muddy Boot story had been completed properly?
It's between them.
Between them makes more sense.
It's before his successful Muddy Boot story because then they go out and John shares his Muddy Boot story and Violet and the others are just so touched and they think it is the right match for her.
I think, I like that placement. Had it come afterwards, I'd been a bit gutted.
Yeah.
But in happy moments, well, it's not really a happy moment, but in more...
Lighthearted.
In Polin news.
Yeah.
In 304, Colin also tells the Lord Squad to fuck off before storming past into the Queen's Ball. So it's that beautiful scene that we've talked about so many times. It's one of our favourites, where he gets out the carriage and pushes past his friends. Yeah. And I do really like him telling them so directly to fuck off. But I think the reason it maybe was taken out was because in that moment in the final cut, you have Snow on the Beach playing and there's such momentum in that scene. And I don't think you really want to pause that momentum to have like a conversation.
And Luke Newton's acting conveys that fuck off message in the way he brushes past them.
Yeah. And then a little bit of gossip for you. Lady Danbury hooks up with a 40-year-old man that she meets at the Dankworth Finch Ball, and we then see them making out before she pulls him into her bedroom. Absolutely go get yours, Lady D.
As you may have inferred, there were a lot of cut Ben moments as well, as we have said. A lot of these moments hinted that he had genuine feelings for Lady Tilly. During the lightning bolt scene, for example, Anthony catches on that Ben really likes Lady Tilly and encourages him to invite her to the engagement ball, an invitation that she's initially hesitant to accept. She also makes a grand entrance at this ball in her heart-stopping plunge dress because she arrives late, and she kind of has her own Cinderella moment, which I think is maybe why they cut it, because, you know, of course, Benedict's actual love interest is supposed to have the Cinderella moment next season.
Yeah, you can't be doing that. Sophie, we come in for you, love. Shockingly, Ben signs some paperwork at the end of the season and apparently temporarily becomes the new Viscount while Anthony is away.
The solicitor tells him that the Viscount has transferred everything into your name temporarily while he is away. The estate books, the trust accounts for your siblings, the household finances. I will need approximately 47 signatures, which Benedict is not happy about.
He is basically ruling over his own regency. There's a regency in the regency. It's regenception. I don't think that's a word.
So now he's in charge.
Now he's in charge.
Yeah. And finally, there's a huge cut Mondrich subplot in part 2 where they agree to sponsor a distant cousin next season. Although they're kind of conflicted about it, they come to the conclusion that they should share their good fortune with others and uplift the less fortunate. This seems to me like it's foreshadowing that Alice will help Sophie next season, although it's possible the cousin could be a new character that they help elevate in society, playing into the class divide themes we will probably see in season 4. Alternatively, I was thinking it's possible we may see Alice being inspired by Sophie's predicament to similarly uplift others on the lower rungs of society next season.
As we said, we'll try and share some of the other details we gleaned in our research. In future episode deep dives, we'll sort of sprinkle them through wherever they're relevant. We're really interested in discussing some of the changes because we've always found details like this really fascinating. The translation from the book through the production process to the final edit that we have on our screens.
For more information on how we were able to connect our research, we were able to review the scripts through a local film and TV reference library run by the Writers Guild Foundation, the Shavelson Web Library. It is open to the public by appointment on weekdays, but please be respectful if you visit yourselves, and note that they have certain rules and do not distribute scripts online, etc., which is why we had to go and read and take copious notes.
But it's been such a great resource and we're excited to share everything we've learned. It'll be fun to compare the final show with the original tidbits and speculate on why certain changes were made. In many cases, things seem to have been cut to tighten up the story and improve narrative flow. As we've said, this has been such common practice throughout every season of the show, and there's always been examples of behind the scenes, of scenes that didn't make it, or as we saw in season 3 where there were reshoots and all the scripts were the reshot scripts, so they didn't have the original scenes before the reshoots.
Right.
But they're still super interesting to pick up on the nuances of the stories, or maybe the little moments that didn't quite make the edit. And for people like us who have always been super into researching the tiny details and reflecting on those and using them to comment on the story and to share our thoughts on season 3, it's been so interesting. So stay tuned. That's been quite a mouthful. But Lecky, shall we perhaps jump into a specific rewatch?
Yeah, it's a long one.
It's a long one. Enjoy. Thanks for that, Lecky. So, a quick recap of where we're at in our rewatch. Last rewatch, we kicked things off as Pen and Colin returned to the ton. There were cold shoulders, sturdy shoulders, a pissed off redhead, an oblivious love confession, and an exquisite handshake. Pen and Colin have patched things up, and our very own Cupid is on hand to transform into Book Colin, matchmaker extraordinaire. And speaking of Book Colin, episode 2 is definitely the most book heavy of the episodes, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so.
I mean, some scenes feel almost lifted straight from the pages.
Yeah, the dialogue, for sure.
Yeah, how do I feel about the episode?
Yeah, well, I think this episode was the most emotional for me.
I just finished episode 2.
Loved it. First kiss.
Yeah. Needed to go to OBS for therapy. Yeah.
Yeah.
I love it. I think it's so light and it's so much fun. And I think sometimes it gets slightly overlooked because so much else happens in this season. And I think with it being a lot lighter and a lot freer, it sort of is eclipsed by like the more overtly romantic moments or the torment. But I think this is them in their world, their friendship. We also get to spend time with oblivious Colin, my true love, for the last time before it all slams into his face.
Your namesake.
Obviously oblivious. He's going to vividly aware as we speak.
Vividly aware.
So we tip our hats, we tip our bonnets to that Colin, and to this really sweet moment of their friendship. And I really love it. Lecky, how do you feel?
That's a good point about Oblivious Colin, because I forget just how much I love Oblivious Colin. That's one of the reasons I love episode 1. So I feel like that I kind of regret how low I ranked episode 2 when we were doing our rankings, just because I do really like this episode. And I feel like there are a few things I might have done differently, but overall I just really love the early Polin rom-com vibes that this episode delivers.
And this episode is, of course, titled How Bright the Moon, because there's a massive fucking full moon throughout this episode. It's a harbinger of fertility, which many people take straight to heart. I think I remember Luke Newton saying during promo that this episode, it was like everyone was under a love potion because everyone was going at it. And we have the full moon ball, and we have the moonlight first kiss, and our listener, very aptly named Moon Pie. You couldn't make it up. What a perfect name for the question. Said, I love this episode and I love the episode title, but why do you think they didn't use Romancing Mr. Bridgerton here? It would have been the perfect spot. I think we've said this before, that we all agreed that Romancing Mr. Bridgerton probably would have worked better here.
100%. Yeah.
Because he is being romanced so overtly.
Yeah.
But I also think that we maybe haven't touched on before is that this is the most book-heavy episode as well.
Right.
The most representative of the book. Yeah.
So what a great nod that would have been to honour it like that.
Who in their right mind would think that episode 6 is more romantic?
Well, episode 6 to me is like, imagine swimming in the most beautiful sunset, and it's just glorious. And it's one of those breathtaking moments in life where you're in the sea, everything is serene and beautiful, and you're just so taken by the natural world. And then you just pan to the side and it's da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And there's a fucking shark in the water.
Oh, I thought you were going in a different direction there. I was going to say, I thought you were going to be like in The Sims, you kind of pull back and you reveal that the Grim Reaper is like holding a flashlight.
Oh, yeah.
And the sun is just the Grim Reaper like shining a spotlight on you.
The ladder's gone.
It's the shark Grim Reaper. Just capture that visual for it. But I think, I would have liked this. I like How Bright the Moon.
It's very poetic.
Yeah.
I think the moon is so important and it's so revelatory in this. If we're going out of the shadows into the light, this is literally shining a bright light that Colin can't evade.
Yeah, and maybe episode 4 would have been acceptable as well, but like not 6.
Yeah, I agree. This should have been Romancing Mr. Bridgerton.
But we take what we get, so let's kick things off. Lady Veg, give us our episode summary.
Dearest gentle listener, as Queen Charlotte searches for something a little different this season, Will and Alice Mondrich find themselves in their grand new home, where they let the housekeeper that they just met determine their sleeping arrangements for the rest of their lives. Colin decides to visit the brothel and smug in the before realizing he's late for a very important date. Pen and Colin start their masterful plan to get her hitched, having several conversations in public before suddenly getting concerned about being seen and moving the party indoors. Inside, they share a beautiful emotionally charged moment caused by Colin not realizing glass is sharp, it make hand go owie. Portia, wingwoman's her daughters, and the episode culminates in the full moon ball, where despite some moderate flirting success for Pen and some pining by Colin, a gossiping Eloise puts the whole night and plan into jeopardy. Careless talk costs livelihoods, Elle. With her future falling apart in front of her eyes, Pen has nothing to lose, so she pops out, puckers up, and positively pivots Colin's life as he knows it.
Thank you, Lady Veg. So, Lecky, should we get things started?
Yes, so our last rewatch began with some dead animals. Luckily, we have some living animals this time around, because at the beginning of 302, there are some adorable little butterflies fluttering about outside the Queen's Palace as a carriage trundles past. I really love that we actually see butterflies alongside bees this season. Obviously, the butterflies are a symbol of the Featherington, so it's nice to see a little nod to them here in the opening of 302. But I also feel like this little visual ties into the discussion we see going on inside the palace,
where we find the Queen and Lady Danbury discussing the Queen's unwillingness to choose a diamond this season, while inspecting I love this. A pineapple bedecked with jewels. Lady Danbury wonders if Whistledown's words from last episode will urge the Queen to finally act and choose a diamond. I mean, it's tradition, guys. And first of all, somewhat hilariously, Lady Danbury inspires the Queen to invent a new moniker for the season.
So Lady Danbury deduces that the Queen wants somebody who sparkles, and it's settled on that they need to find a sparkler this season. Had we not spent many months coming up with ideas for what would happen in season 3 and hadn't entirely latched onto the idea of an emerald of the season, maybe the word sparkler wouldn't disappoint me. But you have to admit it's not one of the heavyweights out there like diamond of the season and succubus of the first water. Sparkler doesn't quite have the same ring to it.
Yeah, that was such a moment of like, oh, okay.
It was a surprise.
Yeah.
It's like flop, flop.
In season 2, she literally says, my diamond must do more than simply sparkle.
Oh, right,
Oh,
yeah.
God.
And she's like, actually, scrap that.
Sparkling's fine.
And if there's one thing that diamonds don't do, it's sparkle. Well, sparkle of the season, who the hell is she going to be?
In this scene, Lady Danbury asks if Lady Whistledown's taunting words in her last issue will push the Queen to finally pick a diamond, or as she says, a sparkler. The Queen responds by saying, and give Whistledown what she wants, I will not. This is interesting if you consider the events in 308 where Penelope, as Lady Whistledown, reaches out to the Queen. She shares her plan to expose herself to the taunt, and the Queen basically helps her pull it off with minimal fallout, giving her exactly what she wanted.
Well, we all have changes of hearts, don't we, Leck?
The Queen also remarks that if I'm going to grant someone favor, she must do more to earn it. Of course, she's talking about her future sparkler, but to me, this brought to mind Penelope, who has long entertained the Queen with her games and allows the Queen to publicly win the battle of wills between them to get what she wants, especially since the Queen goes on to say that her sparkler will make the best match of the season, and of course we know that Penelope will do just that as well.
Yeah, and this also ties into the voiceover we hear next from Lady Whistledown. As we transition to the Featherington house, we hear Whistledown recounting some of the Ton's most interesting love stories, tales of spinsters thought to be on the shelf who surprisingly found love. The last example we receive is that of one Kathani Sharma, who at the ripe old age of 26...
That's a blow to anyone over that age.
Which we're all way past.
Not way past, Veg. Mind your manners here.
Kathani Sharma, who at the ripe old age of 26 managed to snag herself a Bridgerton.
Oh, gosh. A spinster capturing the heart of a Bridgerton. You don't say! Because as Penelope reminded Colin last episode, at the very least, she considers herself a spinster. Listeners, remember, she's barely 19, so I think she's got a few years in here. And we know, spoiler alert, she's destined to capture his heart.
Lady Whistledown then remarks in voiceover,
The truth is that which some dismiss as common rock, time reveals to be precious stone.
The first time I watched this, I thought this was a nod to a potential Emerald of the Season storyline that we keep mentioning,
Rest in peace.
but which of course did not pan out.
I mean, it never existed. Rest in imagination, I guess. Imagine it with me, Leck.
But in retrospect, I wonder if this is just a hint that Penelope was the diamond all along, and of course will be revealed as such at the end of the season.
She's our diamond. I don't know. A part of me still really wishes we had the Emerald of the Season storyline.
Yeah.
I think it was a synopsis, because the synopsis made me really think that Pen was going to have to become a part of society in terms of having the Queen's gaze be on her and not be able to gather gossip as well because she wasn't able to hide in the shadows.
And also the marketing.
What's the marketing?
All the stickers with the emeralds on them. In the trailer, diamonds are not the only gems that sparkle.
Anyway, by the time you'll hear this episode, it'll probably be November and we'll have just had bonfire night. So, you know,
Oh my
so we
gosh.
love sparklers at bonfire night, don't we?
Yes.
It's all fitting. But enough time lingering at the palace, that bejeweled pineapple. It's time to go check on our lovely Penelope.
As we arrive at the Featherington house, we see Ray and Varley helping Penelope prepare for a promenade with a very special non-suitor.
Who could that be? First of all, Varley, what a supportive queen for Pen.
Right. I love this scene so much.
She's like, I've raised you, look at you bloom.
Aw.
But she says, I'm glad that your mama let you keep your dresses. So it feels like, was that a discussion point with Portia? How did it go? Because we know that she's not a fan of the more melancholy palette. So do you think she just had other things on her mind and Pen walks in looking like Julia Roberts in Pretty Woman with all the bags and he's just like, leave it. I ain't got time for this.
Oh, I think so.
And they're not worried about money at the minute either, because they have that money, so...
I feel like the reason she's allowed to keep her wardrobe and spend her pen money on it is that great Aunt Petunia supplied all this money, so she's not worried about their finances as much.
It's probably just a case of, as well, of Pen sort of flying under the radar in the family at this point in time.
Yeah.
And I like to think secretly, she's like, you do look cute though, but probably like you say, she just forgot that she had 3 kids.
and thinks that Penelope has been hoarding her pin money all this time.
Yeah, for how many years?
She's like, you had that much? We were eating potatoes, Penelope.
Oh, well, talking of Pen's new dresses, Veg, how is she looking?
Well, Pen is wearing what we called for a very long time Market Pen, and that was based on a still that was shown as part of Tudum's, well, one of them.
We lose track.
And it was one of the only outfits we had to feed us for months and months. But as you'll see in the episode, the market scene isn't on this day, and Pen ends up wearing something else altogether in that scene. But we do see this dress this episode, and we did a long analysis of it after Tudum. But it's great to see it in motion and close up with Pen in the foreground. This is one of several seafoam green dresses that Pen wears in this episode. And not to be mean, but I do get a bit sick of that colour by the end of the episode.
Yeah.
She found her colour, she sticks to her colour.
I get it. She did her season analysis on TikTok. So it's got tulle cap sleeves, a velvety Spencer jacket, which has got like vine and flower appliques.
She's blooming.
It's almost a little waistcoat, which I thought was cute, and it was like she was channeling her future husband. And the dress has loads of lovely detail, especially, as I said, those appliques all over of the vines and the flowers. Very gorgeous.
I feel like we've gone on a journey with this dress, because the first time we saw it at Dum in 2023, I don't know, I wasn't the biggest fan. I preferred the moonlight dress, but now it's one of my favourites.
Yeah, same.
I think in the scenes, it just looks absolutely radiant on her.
Yeah, because from the market still, I really didn't like how the floral appliques were like sitting on her shoulder. But when you see the full outfit and you see like how she moves in it, it's just breathtaking. She's beautiful.
Yeah, so underrated. And how else is she looking, Vegetable?
Well, Pen also has some lovely makeup in this scene, and she's done that little corner of the eye highlighter trick, which me and Beans are very well acquainted with. Never fails. Jessie and Farida, who are some of Nick's hair and makeup team, they posted about Pen's day looks on their Instagram and said that they were based on what they did all the way back in the first season 3 fittings. So for this scene, it was grey toned versus brown toned in the 301 garden scene. And Jessie said that she wanted the result to be a little bit more than just your everyday makeup, as she's looking for a husband and has a new wardrobe to show off. So, you know, she's dressing to impress a bit. I think that's so sweet.
She's off to the market. She's on the market.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
But she will not go to the market.
She's going toe to toe with the market.
Oh, yeah. This little Penny stayed at home. Oh.
Oh, bless her.
Her curled hair is beautifully pulled over her left shoulder, and I'll tell you now, that shoulder goes through a lot in season 3. And this is a half down look, which I adore. The kiss curls are also out in full force, because Pen is not only in the market for a husband, she's in the market for a good old first kiss. Don't worry, Pen, you'll be able to tick that off your list later this episode. And finally, to complete this adorable little ensemble, later on in the promenade, she carries a little reticule and fan, which will be put to good use for flirting.
And as Ray and Vali sportively assist with the final little touches on her look, Pen checks herself out in the mirror. We can't blame you, girl. You're looking good. And I adore this moment, because besides like the obvious mirror scene, we know we're going to get to it, Pen has really gone on an interesting journey with mirrors in previous seasons. Sometimes she's averted them and been uncomfortable because she's hiding so much. Sometimes it's there revealing her as Lady Whistledown without everyone else knowing. But here, as she sees this new version of her wardrobe and styling, she's really truly looking at herself, and she's so clearly pleased with how she looks.
Oh, yeah.
And I don't think this is a case of, oh, it's like a brand new Penelope. I think this is the Penelope she's always been inside. She's never had control over her styling, and it's such an important way of expressing yourself. And I think this is a time when she's really able to see herself as she sees herself inside. And she also looks so hopeful for the future here.
She's beaming.
She's such an optimist. Even when she gets knocked down, she is so resilient and she is so hopeful here. And I'm sure she's also probably secretly delighted that she gets to go spend the bloody day with a bestie, Colin. She's like, oh, just, you know, happened to hang out with he's definitely my best friend now. I mean, is he her only friend? I don't know, details. But now she knows that they are very good friends once more. She seems so much lighter. That apology handshake really did a number on her, and she ain't mad about it.
And as we leave the Mondriches contemplating the idea of separate bedrooms, we find Portia poring over the latest issue of Lady Whistledown. I found this issue super interesting, and I really appreciated seeing a close-up because a lot of the stories seem oddly relevant to the plot at hand. Of course, we tend to read way too much into things.
Oh, it's no. Surely not.
Let me spiral. So, for example, well, first of all, there's a typo at the start of the left page where Whistledown repeats one story about a woman who recently returned to town after staying in the countryside with her family. Not very interesting. Where Portia is concerned, Lady Whistledown in this issue asks the question, what if some shopkeeper or chimney sweep is next? Of course, this is about the Kent estate being inherited by a boxer son. But what I love is how Portia later parrots these words in the scene when talking about who might inherit the Featherington barony. I find it hilarious because we know from Nicola and other behind-the-scenes interviews that Penelope's taste for gossip was partly inspired by her mother, who ends up repeating her daughter's words here. And Nicola has even said that she mirrors some of Polly's mannerisms, so there are some fun parallels there. Also, I just love how Finch is holding Philippa's hand on the couch at the beginning of the scene, and Portia's exclamation of, "Oh dear God," when she learns her two daughters are more interested in playing with their food than with their husbands.
But in walks Pen announcing that Ray is to accompany me to Rotten Row. And I mean, that is so lore heavy. You wouldn't think it, but oh my gosh, I can't even remember what it was, but
It was a Hungarian voice actor.
Yeah.
but when was it? It was ages ago.
It was like last fall, like the Hungarian voice actress.
You might remember this if you're a long-time listener, but basically, a long time ago,
Yeah.
there was a photo by the Hungarian voice actress who voices Penelope, and she took a selfie of her in the recording booth for the foreign dubbing, and you could see like tiny fragments of Hungarian script. And so fans, including us, spent ages trying to, and it was like bits of words and letters, and none of us are Hungarian, shockingly. And so we spent ages, and you could see this fragment of a line, Ray is to accompany me to Rot. It wasn't Rotten Row, but we were like, it has to be Rotten. We were like, who is Ray?
Yeah.
Because we didn't know at the time. So it's such a tiny scene, but we had so many theories about what was going on. Oh, that's what they were throwing then. They were throwing grapes.
Oh, right.
Because do you remember the early bit? We were like, are they having a game throwing things?
Yes.
And they were throwing the grapes. Honestly, the things we did to pass the time. Adorable.
I didn't put that together. The grapes being tossed around. We were like, is this a baby Polin flashback where some kids are playing a game?
Is it the Bridgertons playing? It was the grapes.
Yeah.
It was always the grapes.
Interesting.
Imagine if we'd seen grapes on that. It would have been so confusing.
Yeah.
Speaking of Philippa, is that Puxatawny Philippa?
That is, as little punks.
Look at her. Oh, she's very sweet. But yeah, I love Pen's reaction to seeing the rest of the Featheringtons in action because she walks in her brand new, very coincidentally, Bridgerton-toned outfit, and visually she's the furthest she's really been from her family, and she rolls her eyes and heads out, still feeling as though she has nothing in common with them. She's the outsider. They're just so far removed from who she is. And we know that the Featheringtons really go on a beautiful journey this season, and they end up in that exact room in the epilogue with Penelope observing her family with such love, such affection, having so much in common with them and healed their relationships.
Yeah.
She's both a Bridgerton and a Featherington at that point, and I really love that journey that they go on. But
to revisit our little tangent about the non-existent Emerald of the Season once more,
rest in imagination.
Lady Whistledown remarks, what this author knows to be true is that diamonds are not the only gems that sparkle. What's funny about this is that in this issue, she goes on to list other gems, including
It's just agony.
rubies, some word that is cut out, wonder what that could be, and sapphires.
Oh no.
Anyway, pour one out for the Emerald of the Season, who is not even visible in this issue of Lady Whistledown. Moving on, we find ourselves on a promenade.
And how lovely. What a day for it, you know? We're off walking with Benedict, Colin and Eloise for a little stroll down Rotten Row. How is he looking, Veg? Because, oh my God, if there's one thing that struck me about this scene, that emotional support curl is out in full perfect force.
Distressed leather coat, boots to the knees, and the whole town's looking quite pleased.
Please.
Yep, we're back in pirate camp for this look from Colin. Underneath the pirate coat, he's a little more demure and mindful for this promenade, sporting one of his several waistcoats. So on the Polin subreddit, user bookmovieTVworm is giving my Tumblr username back in 2013, which is an amalgamation of every single fandom I was in at the time. She actually did a waistcoat analysis, which I'm a massive fan of. And from that analysis, I have it on good authority that Colin wore this waistcoat 5 different times across this season, making it his most worn waistcoat.
Congratulations, waistcoat.
There you go. And to give a little waistcoat lore, if you haven't heard us say it before, in promo, Luke Newton told us that he got some freedom day by day as to what he wore, and that really gave us a sense of realism. And it is a bugbear of mine on TV shows when no one ever repeats outfits, so I, for one, appreciated this.
He's a sustainable king, as we know.
Yeah, sustainable king.
Reduce, reuse, recycle!
Reduce, reuse, recycle. And you know what? Penn will do the same this season too. So what a pair. Pulling it together for the benefit of the planet.
There you go. And Colin is cravated to the nines in this scene. I know I've previously done a full analysis, but let me just set the record straight right off the bat, episode 2 of the rewatch. The cravat comes and goes this season, okay? Sometimes his neck's free, sometimes it's not. I did have a look as to, like, is he more held back in the scenes where he's wearing it?
You are a data analyst in real life, so she's really, she's got the skills and she's applied them to the most important topics troubling our society, like Colin's cravats.
They are, and like I tried to see, have we got this demonstrable link? Is it significant value of when he is wearing the cravat, is he more tied up? I don't think so. So I'm just going to compliment the colours from this point forward.
You know what it is? I think it's because he likes a cravat.
Yeah.
It's like his hair. It's super bouffanty and curly in early episodes. And then it goes super neat and gentlemanly because...
Yeah.
He's celebrating his gentlemanly side.
I think it's just a cravat. Yeah, let's just let go of the imagery and enjoy the free neck when it comes if you're into that, and don't if you're not. There we go.
When Ben expresses confusion about Eloise's behavior this season, he points out that she doesn't seem to be fitting into her new mold. She wears ribbons but isn't carrying a fan, and while she is friends with Cressida, she has no interest in befriending other debutantes. Somewhat like Colin, who is wearing a new mask himself this season, it's an imperfect fit. And Eloise tries to sidestep this line of questioning by shooting a pointed look at Colin and remarking that it's not me whose outlook has changed.
Eloise, what a barb. And as the most eligible bachelor of the year, he is certainly drawing attention from the ladies passing by. And I find Colin's quiet reaction to Eloise's jab quite interesting here because I think he doesn't really react too much, but I think it definitely stung him a little. And if we find Penn feeling quite hopeful in episode 2 after the events for episode 1, I think here we find Colin still reeling from the end of episode 1, where Lady Whistledown had a vicious, but ultimately true, sorry Colin, assessment of him. And I think it really sticks with him and it really drives a lot of what happens early in this episode. But sorry, Ben and Elle, we'd love to hang out with you some more. But there's a redhead on the horizon and, in classic platonic Colin style, he is compelled by friendship to immediately ditch whoever he's with and beeline, R.I.P. Edmund, straight for his very good friend. And we had a couple of questions from our listeners over on Patreon about this particular moment. Scribble Vinyl said, does Ben know that something is going on between Polin? I think he's always ignoring seeing anything Polin on purpose. I mean, we see that in episode 3, right? And we've seen it multiple times throughout the past seasons. And do you think he realised they both had a thing for each other, something more than friends, or does he only figure it out after the engagement notice in Whistledown? And Helena also said, when Colin goes to Penn, why doesn't Benedict react at all, especially because he's definitely noticed that Eloise has looked? Did he not see them, or is he just in his thoughts, or is it not simply a moment for him because he's seen them together so often and doesn't question it? I think Benedict is one of those characters who he sees something, he's like, it's funnier to just let it play out as it's going to play out. Yeah. I think he lets people be. I don't know how much he knows.
I think if we asked Luke T about it, he would probably say that, you know, he was reacting and things like that. And I think he was, and it's just what was kept in or not kept in. But I think everyone will have made a big decision on how they're going to react to things. So it was definitely pointed.
I think he is somewhat blind to the Polin relationship.
Benedict, being blind to... No, not my Ben, no. Good luck, Sophie.
So I feel like in 108 and 303, for example, 2 scenes where he's with Colin and Colin promptly ditches him to go see Penelope. I feel like he finds the reaction curious, but maybe doesn't quite put together that it's because Colin wants to be with Penelope. He's just like, oh, all right, my brother's fucking off again to go chat with someone else.
What's new? I feel like he has some of the puzzle pieces where it's like the scene in episode 3 where Colin is so discombobulated after his dream.
Yeah.
And Ben's like, what the fuck is going on? But also,
Yeah.
you do you, mate. He's got so many siblings.
Yeah.
They're all acting weird at all times, aren't they? He was shocked by the engagement announcement. So I think he was somewhat surprised by the Polin relationship.
Yeah.
But also a lot of this episode is exploring, they get away with a lot. We'd always known this. And I think that society just kind of accept their friendship the way that Cressida does. I think Cressida represents that, where they're like, they've always been close friends. It's just, it's not that big a deal, especially when they've grown up near each other.
Yeah.
I don't know. I wish it had been explored more.
Oh, yeah. I was hoping for a lot more sibling reactions this season. We got a good amount from Violet, but yeah.
And we lose the society's reactions after episode 4 as well.
Yeah.
Also, as a brief tangent, since we were talking about Colin's coat, I was collecting screenshots for our James Spoon episode the other day, and the coats he wears this season have some great movement to them as well. There are some great shots of them being blown around.
Excellent coats this season.
Yeah.
I love Colin's look in this scene. I love everything about Pen and Colin on this promenade. It's just gorgeous.
And upon seeing Colin and Pen rush off together, Eloise decides to borrow a fan from nearby debutantes, trying to commit herself even further to her new life as a debutante and seemingly distance herself from Penelope. Interestingly, in the original script, one of the reasons Eloise agrees to approach the other debutantes in the first place is because Ben asked her to accompany him to greet them, because for the last 2 episodes, Ben's siblings have basically been trying to push him to interact with society women and take a more active part in society. Even in the scene after Eloise criticizes Colin about his changed outlook, Colin redirects the conversation toward Benedict, as evidenced in his "Did you not promise Antony you would give society a try" line. That is a reference to some cut dialogue from 301, and there's also some cut dialogue from this scene as well, where both Colin and Eloise challenge Ben to talk and dance with a lady. So Colin says, "Have you ever even danced with a society lady?" To which Eloise replies, "Let alone talk to one. You might begin with that one," referring to some of the debutantes nearby, "who is taking the measure of you as if you were some exotic dish." The dancing bit you'll of course see revisited later on at the full moon ball, where Ben finally accepts Colin's challenge and dances with Miss Stowell. So there's some extra context if you were curious.
A crumb, if you will. And then we're treated to, as I said, one of the most gorgeous shots in season 3 as the two stroll alongside one another. And one of the reasons I adore this episode is because we spend so much time with Polin together as these platonic, oblivious friends.
Yeah.
And I think the threads throughout this episode are so interesting because on the one hand, you've got Penelope, who I think is far more measured, trying to move forward with their new, far more balanced friendship, where they are genuinely friends. Because it's like she says in 306, like she always has been Colin's friend, but it was always layered with this deep pining that shaped the way she approached their friendship. And in this episode, after their resolution in 301, she's no longer doe-eyed or overwhelmed by love when she's with him. I think she's finally come to terms with the space he occupies in her life. She's no longer dreaming that he will be her husband. She's genuinely trying to find a husband. Meanwhile, we're in the dying moments of oblivious Colin here. And I've got my popcorn at the ready. I mean, it's literally my Netflix and chili popcorn that I've still got from that bloody pop-up. Because she's sort of asserting herself like we're genuinely friends. He starts to lose his platonic grip on his feelings for her. I think we find him tumbling further and further as the episode goes on until you get that fatal moment of realisation during the first kiss where it hits him like a freight train. Or like a freight carriage. I don't know what's more period appropriate. But as Pen and Colin meet up with Ray very close by, because God forbid those two bend the rules of propriety, imagine.
She's not that close by.
Well, she's like...
I was going to say, she's hanging way back. She's like, I'll let this play out. I see what's happening here.
Technically.
She's just biding her time to collect her next bribe.
Yeah, she'll send him a bill after the promenade. Like, itemised. But Pen is ready to get straight to business. She's like, no fucking about, mate. Let's go. Colin, however, is still really burned by Whistledown's words and he feels really insecure. And he wonders if she'll no longer want his help after what Whistledown wrote. And we know that Pen really deeply regretted scolding him in her papers. So she's super quick to ironically assure him that Whistledown's never been more wrong about anybody.
Colin goes on to remark that they will dance on the day of her demise. You don't say. But this is the beginning of Penelope realizing just how much Colin despises Whistledown, something that will continue to build and suffocate her in part 2 when she struggles to tell him the truth. That moment of anger in 301 will reverberate pretty catastrophically throughout the rest of the season. Not the best move there, Pen.
But what can you do? Enough of Whistledown. It's time for the lessons to begin. Pen asks if there's, our little bookworm, she's like, is there a book on charm I can read?
Yeah, he did say that charm could be taught, so her mind jumped to, there must be some literature on the subject.
Well, if there's one thing about Colin, it's that he prefers a more hands-on approach to education, whether that's dragging her into a little room to tell her about some rubies, or whether that's, teaching her in front of a mirror. He's a practical kind of guy.
Oh, God.
And here he encourages her to participate in real life. He is rejecting her imaginary world of fiction. And I think this is interesting because he totally throws her into the fire here and she flounders. So later on in the Remarkable Shade of Blue scene, he pulls her back into a make-believe world where she's comfortable. I think that's so beautifully done.
Yeah.
But for now, all she has to do, apparently, so simple, everyone get ready. Professor Bridgerton is back in the house. Not only does he know geography, he knows how to flirt. Because all you have to do is wave a fan and flutter your lashes, because that's all it takes. God bless Colin Bridgerton, because Penelope ultimately just has to breathe and he's gazing at her with oblivious eyes. So I don't know that he's the most balanced person to be able to make a judgment on what men want from Pen.
Yeah.
But I also think that in this scene here, I think we've still got that cavalier, swaggery Colin in action. There's a bit of facade as he's strolling with her. And I think that is reactionary to what Whistledown does. And I think in the brothel scene, I think we see that whether you like it or not, what Pen wrote in Whistledown really prickles Colin and sends him into being a bit of a swaggery rake as he reacts against it. And I think if you contrast that later to the next lesson, the Remarkable Shade of Blue and the journal scene, I think we see that swagger fall away where it's just the two of them away from society. But there's a group of men up ahead, so get those fans at the ready because it's time for a little bit more failing spectacularly. How lovely. You know what? I can't watch the scene in episode 1 where she fails spectacularly, but I can watch this because it's kind of adorable and it's played so well.
I think it's because Lord Wilding, Joe Barnes, is really funny the way he calls her out on what she's doing when he says
he's just so perplexed as well
that she seems discomposed. And then I really love, I think I've mentioned this before, that some of Nicola's mannerisms and her delivery bring to mind Bridget Jones for me, especially in 303 with the grass comment and all of that. But I also get that vibe here when Lord Wilding remarks that she seems discomposed, because Pen awkwardly replies with like a no and then like kind of doubles down on her being perfectly fine. Great scene.
I always look at Colin's reaction when Pen is trying to flirt and fluttering away, because so much of episode 2 is watching him slowly slip until he is slapped in the face by that kiss. Metaphorically, I mean. Yeah. That makes their first kiss sound really romantic. It's beautiful.
I was going to say, it kind of reminds me of the Monty Python sketch where you get like slapped in the face by the fish. it's fun.
I mean, don't give Veg an opportunity to slap Colin Bridgerton in the face with a fish. She will take it. But look at his face during this interaction. It is gold, because he is utterly enamoured with his geeky little best friend, because he is also a geeky little best friend.
Oh.
He's kind of like, this might need a little bit of work.
Yeah, I think it's cute.
I think he is well and truly being romanced by this.
I don't know if he's being romanced by this, but I think he thinks she's cute here with her awkward flirting.
Is that not the absolute point of romance, Lecky?
Well, I mean, he's not giving her hard eyes, but he's like, you're adorably bad at this.
Because he's like that too sometimes. He's geeky and makes dad jokes.
Yeah.
Just let go of the swagger, babe. You'll be fine. But it's time to return home, Lecky.
While Colin heads home to study his curriculum, Pen adorably and rather relatably faceplants on her bed after her embarrassing attempts at flirting.
Aww.
Yeah, and I love her little smile on the bed here. It's quite subtle, and it comes after like a bit of a frustrated sigh. But she does smile, and to me it reads like she felt a bit hopeless. But then I do think that she did feel a bit of that frisson with Colin, even if she doesn't quite realise it yet.
Yeah, because it's not that heartbroken hopelessness that she felt after the Four Seasons ball, where she felt so alone and isolated from the people she loved the most. And she felt like she didn't have Colin and she didn't even recognise him. But I think she's genuinely in a better headspace this episode, so she can have an awkward encounter like that, but knowing that Colin was there and knowing that there's still hope, and it's just so much lighter. And you know what? If you do prefer your Penelopes a little bit more tormented, then don't worry, she'll be publicly humiliated again before you know it.
Great.
Oh.
And we find ourselves back downstairs in the Featherington drawing room where Portia finds out one of her two daughters has been getting down to business, but not in the way she expected.
And I would love to have a quick spotlight on Philippa here. I think a lot of people agreed, but Philippa looks truly breathtaking in this scene.
Stunning.
Mm-hmm. We know that the costume designers went for quite a Hollywood glamour theme with Pen, but this is also what Philippa is giving to me. I don't know if you guys agree.
Mm-hmm.
And there's something about her makeup look and the way her hair falls that is truly wonderful. And honestly, I think we're all a little bit jealous of Finch in this scene.
What I love about Philippa's outfit in this scene is that she's covered in butterflies, much like little Philomena is in the epilogue. And Portia remarks that the full moon is a harbinger of good fertility, and it seems that Philippa's mini-me is definitely on the way or will be soon. While this is more of a stretch, Prudence is also wearing a floral pattern in the scene, and we see little Petunia Petty Dankworth in a floral number in the epilogue.
Babies are in the making, like.
That's a terrible transition to this next scene. But Anna's Prudence...
No, let's just establish there's no good transition. There isn't one, so you might as well make a bad one.
And as Prudence proclaims that sex flattens her hair, we find ourselves in the brothel.
Sorry guys. I've decided to take a leave of absence from the podcast. I hope you will forgive me.
No, babe, it's too fucking bad. If we have to go to the brothel, you have to go to the brothel.
No.
There's some good scenery. We'll get into the scenery. As Prudence proclaims that sex flattens her hair, we find ourselves in the brothel, where Colin is flattened against a mattress, seemingly pinned in by women on both sides, as he's busy grasping thighs and uttering sighs. I didn't mean to get poetic there. Or as the subtitles have it, panting. Lovely. Congrats, Colin. You definitely showed Lady Whistledown you weren't lying about your new rakish personality, but have perhaps traumatized the pirate coat.
I think it's been more used to dealing with the seas than with the seamen.
Thank you.
Gross. Thanks for that. What a wonderful time we're having. Okay, we're at the brothel. It was always going to happen. Now, let's just provide a little bit more context to this, because the brothel scene did not just happen to us. I mean, kind of did, but...
Forewarning. We received forewarning.
This was leaked.
Right.
We did receive a warning. There was a lighthouse screaming on the horizon. If you don't remember, if you've repressed the memory, or if you're new to the pod, you might not know what we're talking about. But basically, in the weeks prior to season 3, part 1 being released, a tabloid in the UK released a report that Colin engaged in a threesome in a brothel in episode 2. Yeah. Now, I can't say that it was
taken well.
That we handled it well.
That was one of the worst days of our
lives.
No, but it was a panic.
Panic is a word I'd use.
We were in shambles.
It was debunking, rebunking. Every stage of grief was embarked upon.
Yes. A lot of time was spent in the denial.
A lot of time.
More evidence came out. We were like, this can't be true.
Yeah, it was just hard to reconcile that story with what we knew about episode 2 by that point, because by that point we knew that 302 was going to be the lessons and him being romanced by Penelope. So the idea of him...
We'd seen the remarkable shade of blue, and we were like, he's going to go from the brothel straight to the remarkable shade of blue. And it was so hard to tonally reconcile that storyline.
Yeah, until we learned about the Lady Whistledown issue. But yeah.
I will say, and we'll get to it in episode 4, we also heard rumours about the episode 4 brothel scene that were quite a bit more graphic than it ended up being in the show, I will say. A lot of memes were made to cope with this. Ultimately, I'm very glad that we knew before going in.
Yeah, I am.
Sorry, everything is going to be an innuendo in this segment. Just
I didn't even...
Grin and bear it, guys. I'm glad it was leaked. Because I tell you what, had we gone into the episode not knowing, and then this happened, after like cutesy little, Polin on a promenade, it'd have been a shock. However, I will say that we never would have gone into this episode completely unknown, regardless of that tabloid, because I remember in like 2 days before the season was released, there was a really wholesome article in House and Garden where it was like talking about the set design, and it was like, oh, there are flowers, and oh, look at this pretty curtain, and it's so casually mentioned. Now imagine that hadn't been leaked. Imagine we were immersed in so much promo, and we were like, oh my gosh, Polin is going to be so wholesome. They just casually said, design inspiration can also come from the most unlikeliest of places. An eye-catching, kitsch rounded bed with pale pink silk curtains that appears in one scene with Colin in a bordello. Was inspired by the style of... I can't even finish it. Was inspired by the style of 1970s French knickers. Can you imagine if the first time we heard about the brothel scene was that?
Oh my God. And we were collecting little crumbs in our little basket. And then I was like, guys, I would have messaged like, guys, what's a bordello? Just...
We'd have seen bordello, we'd have been like, no, it's like some holes, no, not a brothel, not a brothel.
God.
I also appreciate house and garden flouncing in a
Fucking hell.
That is a really hilarious summary. Thank you, House and Gordon.
Thank God for those tabloid reports.
Yeah.
So in the end, it was traumatizing, but I'm glad it happened the way it did. Now, let's go into the scene. What's going on, Leck?
Now, many Polin fans have studied this scene in detail for various reasons. In the process, we've determined that this indeed is reshoot Colin. And as reshoot Colin glances at the clock and realizes he's decidedly late for a very important date, we glimpse one of my favorite characters this season, coming to Reddit near you whenever Obs and I have spare time. One of the contenders for this year's random object game indeed hails from the brothel. Yes, Polin fans, feast your eyes, or ears, I guess, on the mini modesty screen. Carefully nestled on a nightstand in this house of ill repute, next to a bowl of pears if you're feeling peckish, is a mini modesty screen perfectly sized to cover the bare essentials, possibly not very well. Your mileage may vary. Why there is a modesty screen in a brothel is beyond me, but I guess a miniature one makes more sense than the alternative.
Guys, go rewatch this scene. You'll become the biggest fan of the mini modesty screen.
We will include a collage of this probably.
And you know what, like, I wish we had a mini modesty screen to hide behind in this scene. Ideally not a mini one, but we'll take what you can get, as will Colin, evidently.
Oh no.
And how is she looking, Veg?
Well, let me say that I was a very good podcaster this time, and I wrote a lot of my script, and I specifically wrote that I would not be speaking during the brothel section. So I'm already quite cross that you've added this little bit in for me, but I'll read it like a good little podcaster.
Off you go. Cool storytelling, Veg.
So, like Colin, Mini Modesty Screen is flaunting her assets. Nestled inside a tasteful wooden frame with a decorative border, we find screen panels painted with the images of the natural world in the form of flowers, trees, and a bird soaring in the skies above, far away from the brothel, as most Polin fans would wish to be.
Okay, Veg. We're here in the brothel. We know this is a hugely controversial topic within the fandom. There's been so much discussion about it. And to be honest, I think our good friend, Purple Cat Doctor, who asked us a question about this scene, really eloquently captured some of the to and froing, hopefully not literally the toing and the froing, of this scene and the storyline as a whole. She said, I'm interested in your opinions on the brothel scene in episode 2. Prior to season 3, I really wanted Virgin Colin because I didn't want them to change his personality and make him a rake. I desperately wanted a different type of hero to the previous 2 seasons. But what we got was actually probably better. They didn't change him, the rake was fake, and there was so much development of his character and therefore our understanding of him. Colin spiralling when Pen didn't write back, trying to change his entire personality to fit societal and his brother's expectations, but ultimately failing because he was not himself until he was with Pen, showing through his journal that he missed a connection even when intimate with others and finding it in Pen. Oh, sorry, Purple Cat Doctor, I don't think you meant that innuendo, but in hindsight, it was important that he had prior experience before, so there could be no argument that his experience of being with Pen was exceptional because it was Pen, not because he had no other reference. Having said all that, I still don't like the brothel scenes. I'm glad some people find them hot, but I just don't. Remember when we thought our worst nightmare would have been the European sex montage? Okay. Now I think I would have preferred that, but I must admit there is an evil satisfaction in his inability in the scene in episode 4. I'm exceedingly happy with the Colin we got for season 3, but I could just do without these scenes. What are we thinking?
I think it would have been interesting if they had, I don't mind it and I see what they're going for, but it also would have been interesting if he came back and he was faking this rakish personality, but even that was fake. He didn't have to be a virgin, and I don't mind his kind of fling with the Contessa.
We talked about it before, but I think that would have given him all the information that he would have needed, and he could have come back and lied and exaggerated, and that would have been interesting.
Yeah, I just feel like it would have been interesting because he was a different hero than we'd seen in the previous 2 seasons if they had dialed that up a little more, but I do like that the rakish part of him is this fake persona that he's adopted for the beginning part of this season.
I also don't mind that he wasn't a virgin, and what I'll say is I really like the direction of Colin's character in part 1. I think it's very true to the Colin we know in terms of him struggling to find his place, feeling the weight of societal expectations, struggling with that, and then finding so much freedom with Penelope and realising that it doesn't matter as long as he's true to himself. What I think I struggle with is I just don't know that this was necessary.
Agreed.
I feel like we had those scenes with his friends and with his travels that captured it well. And I understand that he's reacting to Whistledown in this scene and he's trying to prove it to himself, but I think the same story could have been told without it, and it's a scene that I don't particularly enjoy. I don't particularly find it comfortable. I find it a little bit out of character, and I like the story of intimacy that is told for Colin. I just don't know that we needed this to convey that.
I agree. I also feel like that scene in episode 4 does a lot of heavy lifting when it conveys that he craves intimacy and he doesn't like the way that other men are so cavalier about the way they talk about sex and relationships. I feel like that scene says so much that we almost didn't need the brothel scenes. Yeah.
Yeah, powerful. I agree that, ironically, a European sex montage, not a sex montage, but that story in Europe, and I think what happened in Europe was really real to him in terms of it meant something to him and it shaped his perception of the world. And then he comes back to the ton and he can't speak about it because Penn didn't listen to him, and he feels like he has to fit in and he struggles to reconcile that. And then, of course, tied in with this scene about the brothel is Colin's virginity, which has been a topic many times in the fandom. And in the LA Times, Jess Brownell talked about this, and there was actually a debate between the showrunner Jess Brownell and Shonda Rhimes as to whether he was going to be a virgin or not. And Jess wanted him to be a virgin because she felt it tracked with his character, and she said that him coming back at the start of the season acting like he was this Regency fuckboy was surely an act.
I like that idea.
But Shonda made a point that if he was really trying to convince himself, he'd be doing it. So he would be going out and being a womanizer. I think some of those scenes in the brothel, for example, which I know are very controversial, when Shonda and I were talking about it, these represent him trying to lean into this toxic masculinity and trying to prove himself that he can just be like his older brothers. As you can see in the second scene, he can't even convince himself for longer than a week. So this is the direction that they ended up taking. But yeah, I think I agree. I'd sum it up as I don't mind that he wasn't a virgin. I think that works well with the story. I love the story in episode 4, and I understand that this is a part of it. Ultimately, I feel like I'm accepting of this scene for what it is. I'm not a fan of it, but the good thing is you can skip it and it doesn't impact the story.
Yeah, I have slightly, like, even with the sort of explanations and I know where it fits in Colin's story, it still doesn't quite sit right with me. But yeah, so I just think that although you can explain it, it is just something that just creates a kind of shadow over a lot of what happens for me, even so. And like, you know, being just like his older brothers, he's just seen his older brother, Anthony, have a beautiful romantic story in season 2. Really, it's ultimately the female gaze view of love, as a lot of Regency stuff is.
Also, I just said that the conversation in episode 4 does a lot of heavy lifting in terms of sexualizing Colin as a character and presenting him as the romantic lead for the season. His pirate getup in episode 1 also does a lot of heavy lifting.
Also, I think the other thing that sticks with me isn't necessarily seeing Colin sleeping with other women in season 3. I think it's a context because you had this character who's so focused on consent.
Yes, and has very close bonds with the women in his life. Yeah.
So much respect for women. And then you have him in a brothel where ultimately the question of consent is incredibly murky within the historical context. So, I don't know. I think it's just something that I can sort of clip from my mind.
Yeah. Well, I kind of wish the writers had gone in a different direction. I do understand what they were doing here because I feel like there is a part of Colin, although he longs for intimacy and a deep and meaningful connection with someone else. Maybe one of the reasons we also see him with more than one woman is because he's perhaps self-consciously rebelling against this feeling that is repeatedly driving him toward Penelope, especially A, now that he knows he's hurt her, and B, after he's promised to help her marry someone else, not consciously realizing that is a decision that will hurt him and just make him feel more lonely.
Speaking of Penelope, right, we've got another lesson to attend. Look at the time. It's 11:15 a.m. Colin, why are we going to the brothel at 11 in the morning?
He was looking for a wake-up call, but he went to the wrong place.
And he's got a lesson with the redhead to attend to.
When the women ask him if they will see him again at the same time tomorrow, Colin coyly says, perhaps. Perhaps? Colin, these women work for a living. You can't just say you're maybe going to show up for an appointment. That's like saying maybe you'll eat dinner tomorrow. I mean, not really. They probably get paid more than that.
Or maybe not in the fucking 1800s.
Or your dentist being like, oh, you're going to come back next week for some more treatment? And you're like,
yeah, maybe.
I do think it's interesting, though, that he is non-committal about going back, because on the surface, it's him trying to be sort of cool and mysterious, but it also shows that he's not really fully into it.
Yeah.
And while I'm not a fan of the brothels, I do think it's interesting to see when we do go there. So we don't go there in episode 1. He's just flirting. And he goes in episode 2 after Lady Whistledown trashed him and he's feeling cut open and exposed.
Yeah.
And we don't go to the brothel at all in episode 3, and we only return in episode 4 when he is completely lost. He's absolutely not into it. His head is in a terrible space. Do you think he went again in episode 3?
No.
I think he was so consumed by Pen in like in a more hopeful, discombobulated way that I don't think he did.
Yeah, he was trying to place himself in a coma, so he was just dreaming all of episode 3 about her.
Yeah. He was like, I can find this girl in my dreams.
Yeah.
Off I go. Okay, let's leave the brothel.
Thank you.
Because we cannot be late to see Pen.
We find still reshoot Colin in the market. Although he claimed he was decidedly late, it appears he was unintentionally or perhaps intentionally, but wouldn't admit it to himself because he'd also have to admit other things that have nothing to do with visiting other women in a brothel early. He's waiting for Pen by the feather stall, which I also find hilarious. Meet the Featherington by the feathers. Excellent planning there. I'm sure she won't miss you.
Listeners, many of you are fans of Colin's various nods throughout season 3. We know he loves to nod at Pen. So I hope you enjoyed this one as he bequeaths a lingering nod to some passing ladies. He's still in full swagger mode, fresh from the brothel. I hope to God he showered.
Yes.
I just cannot understand his day. We'll have to leave it, but I just do not understand the scheduling at play here.
Yeah.
But this is one of the moments that Jess talks about where he's trying to convince himself by sort of flirting with these passing ladies. And I think you can see in his eyes he's a little bit dead. It's not real. However, just as he nods at the ladies, Pen slips into frame. You look really carefully. She also catches this little moment of flirtation with the other women. And it's one of those signs to Pen that Colin is just her very good friend who was born for someone else, as Book Pen would say.
Yes, Pen has turned up for market scene take 2. So we know from behind the scenes footage that Luke and Nicola filmed a different version of this scene initially. We were able to see a snippet of that script, which played out a bit differently with some cute back and forth about riddles. It seems like they likely replaced the original scene to punch up the humor a bit, like with the inclusion of the Willow scene, once Jess Brunel saw the extent of Luke's comedy chops, because she saw him perform in The Shape of Things and decided to bring him back to shoot the Willow scene, for example. So I bet something similar happened with the market scene, as we have this playful energy between Pen and Colin as they discuss their first meeting. But while we don't have a copy of the original market scene, there is a precursor to the new market scene that was cut from the final edit, where it's revealed that Colin sent Pen a note asking her to meet him at the market. So Penelope says, I received your note to meet here, and Colin, in an adorably incognito manner, says, pretend to be shopping for silver. Pen does so, a bit confused. The scene in the sweets tent in 303 where Penelope then tells Colin to pretend to be loitering is a callback from this cut exchange. Also notably, there is an adorable back and forth between Pen and Colin here where he tries to tell her that they need to do their best to evade scrutiny. Penelope says, is there a reason for such secrecy? And Colin says, we must be discreet. A gentleman and a lady spending time together alone, as we will be for our lessons, could be misconstrued. Penelope says, is such deception truly necessary? I do not believe anyone would mistake Colin Bridgerton for entertaining just Penelope Featherington, to which Colin replies, you have never been just anything. Come along, which is like the cutest thing in the world. And as Pen allows herself a private smile, Colin continues forward and Pen hurries after him.
How are Pen and Colin looking, Veg?
Well, Newmarket Pen is wearing a muted but gorgeous green dress with a matching shawl. The dress is covered in green and brown floral appliques on the bodice. And stylistically, the dress somewhat resembles what we see Dream Pen wearing in 303. Pen's hair is pulled back into a half updo with soft waves, and our ever-present face-framing kiss curls, which are becoming more and more relevant.
Yeah. It's approaching.
Yeah, maybe that's, they're getting bolder as we get closer.
Reaching out to him.
Oh, and there's a pearlescent headpiece. Completing the look, some of her hair appears to have been braided into small flowers, which you can just glimpse on the side and back of her head. Very, very cute. And as for Colin, in addition to our beloved pirate coat, Colin is re-wearing his dark blue golden waistcoat from the Garden Apology scene in 301. And unlike golden, for the purpose of this scene, we're arguing it's golden yellow. Cravat, perfect for reminiscing about about the Polin past, and most importantly, another devilishly yellow fashion accessory.
And we get a classic bit of Polin miscommunication, which leaves Penelope hilariously, but also slightly bleakly thinking that Colin has just said she's unteachable. I love Nicola's delivery of that line. She's like, "You think I'm unteachable?" And Colin assures her that she is very teachable, as we'll see firsthand during that good old mirror scene in Ep 5. She's a fast learner. I just want to give a shout out to the market set design here, because although I think I would have preferred the old scene in the episode script wise, I love the way the scene is designed.
Yeah.
Because in a conversation about their first meeting, they're surrounded by clocks and Grecian statues representing just how deep rooted their history is. When Colin's walking as well, he rests on a post, and if you look at that post, it's got like Polin green ribbon wrapped around it.
I knew you were going to mention this. I think this is a stretch, but we'll go there. We'll go there. He touches her green ribbon.
Oh, how many episodes in are you, Lecky? How many episodes have you made for this show?
I don't know.
And you're saying, oh, a piece of ribbon is a bridge too far? You're going to live and die by that, are you?
Go ahead.
And as we all know, references to Eros and Psyche are omnipresent throughout the season. I'm currently trying to bully Lecky into letting us do a mini episode deep dive. I understand a mini deep dive is slightly paradoxical around Christmas into how the myth and Greek mythology in general is included in the Polin story. So if you want that mini episode, Lecky will buckle to peer pressure. So please comment the bow and arrow emoji on our YouTube or Instagram or wherever you find us. But right here, we see another little nod to the myth as we glimpse a statue of Eros and Psyche on the table between Pen and Colin. This is a sculpture known as Psyche Revived by Cupid's Kiss by the Italian artist Antonio Canova. And we'll see the same imagery again throughout the season, most notably during the ballet at the Queen's Ball, where the dancer playing Eros seems to revive his Psyche in a similar manner. And then, to my absolute delight, we get a recounting of the Polin first meeting. I love this so much. Book fans, you're in for a treat, because this is lifted almost straight from the book, although the ages have been slightly adjusted. I'm so glad that they kept the origin story very similarly. Colin says, "Do you remember when we first met? I was riding my horse, minding my own business, when I was assaulted by a devilishly yellow head covering." And Pen says, "It was not my fault. The wind blew it off my head. A force of nature, you might say." And Colin then says, "You certainly seemed pleased when I landed in the mud. You were so very charming about it, teasing me mercilessly, in fact."
Cute.
We talked about flashbacks a lot. I do still wish there had been a flashback.
Yeah. It didn't necessarily have to be the meet cute, but it would have been nice to see the dynamic between baby Polin.
You know what? My ultimate flashback, I would have liked to have seen little baby Colin trying to navigate his dad's death and trying to make everyone happy and trying to look after Penelope and look after his sisters.
Yeah.
And sort of you see where his need to be needed comes from when he didn't know what to do. But he had this beacon of light in his life through his friendship.
Yeah, exactly. I was going to say, I think I would have liked to have seen a flashback in part 2 as he's trying to reconcile the Penelope that he knows with the Lady Whistledown side, because he even starts to question whether she's ever really cared about him. So I feel like inserting a flashback at that point where we see that she's really cared deeply about him all along since their childhood would have been a good place for that.
Yeah, unless she started Whistledown when she was like 6 years old and she's always just been there conniving in the background.
Yeah.
But, you know, we didn't get the flashback of the meet cute, but we do get the next best thing, which isn't just us hearing about their first meeting. I particularly really like that it's told from Colin's perspective. I think that is so important that he brings it up and that we hear how he felt about that moment, because book fans and show fans, you can tell that Penelope's been in love with him, as she says in episode 6, since the moment they first met. So this is the moment she fell in love. I think that's been so clear that she's always had this adoration for him. But to hear from his perspective and to hear that he was charmed by her is such an interesting flip on their dynamic. It's like the DNA of their bond. And I think it's interesting that she held the balance when they were little, where he was charmed and he was enamored. And we get that little backstory here about how their relationship changed in adolescence, because Colin says, "We were children before the self-consciousness of adulthood set in, before we started caring what others think." And I think that also taps into why their bond changed during adolescence, when Pen started looking at him like this love-struck little puppy that we saw so much in season 1 and season 2. And then, of course, a shout out to the original Polin shipper, the horse that Colin was riding on when they met.
Yep.
The first in a very long line of equestrian interludes in the Polin love story.
Yes.
Well done to be the first witness on the scene. Colin then ties this self-consciousness into apparently what he discovered when he was abroad, that no one knew him, no one knew who he was supposed to be, and he was freed from being Colin Bridgerton, the Colin Bridgerton that the Ton society, his family perceives him to be. And that's how he became himself, because living for the estimation of others is a trap. Once you break free, the world opens up. And that's obviously Colin's part-win struggle perfectly summed up. He feels like living for the expectations and estimations of others is what paralyzes him.
Yeah.
It's interesting, though, that he genuinely felt like himself when he was abroad. And I believe that. I believe that when he went away, it meant something to him, as we see in his writing. And I think it's when he comes back that he struggles to transpose that into the societal expectations without having Penelope's guiding hand there to have sort of led him back home.
It's interesting that you said that, because I was going to say, of the things he says here, I feel like the most truthful statement is that he said that no one knew him when he was abroad. I feel like he was deeply missing a connection with somebody else, and he felt the void of Penelope's letters, their absence from his life. So I don't know how much he was being himself abroad, because I feel like maybe there were moments where he was himself and exploring his writing in secret and stuff like that. But I feel like even with his relationship with the Contessa, there were probably moments of falseness where he wasn't being himself, where he was trying on that persona of the rake, of the man who has these relationships with women, and it doesn't really matter. So I feel like the most truthful thing he says here is that no one knew him, because we see in his journals that is how he felt. He voices those feelings in his writing.
And then, of course, Penelope talks about why she wants a husband, and it's hiding to freedom, which ties beautifully back into the purpose scene from 206, which I think Colin definitely remembers. And this delightful walk down memory lane is sadly broken when Pen reflects that she used to feel the most comfortable at Sunday teas at Bridgerton House, something that's no longer possible for her. And Colin presses her to find out what happened between Pen and Elle, which Pen quickly evades with a tragically prophetic line that she should get back before they are noticed. Lecky, I remember when we were watching this for the first time, a lot of these early scenes when they're just hanging out together so blatantly, you're like, how is no one noticing them together?
Yeah.
She's like, God forbid we get noticed. Now it's like, mate, you've been strolling around the bloody market. You weren't invisible.
Yeah.
The point is that they obviously weren't invisible, and at the time I was like, I messaged you, I think, and I said something like, oh, it's gonna be really bad, they're going to be noticed in a really big way, which obviously is a disaster that befalls us at Ostley.
I also like that he's obviously listening to her, because she says that she feels the most comfortable at Bridgerton House. So for their next lesson, he's like, I'm going to bring her where she is most comfortable so that she can practice there.
And I have to give a shout out to Ray in this scene. Our listener, Helena, said, in the market scene, Ray's looks are definitely very obvious. Do you think she suspected it from the beginning, or did Pen maybe talk to her about her friendship with Colin? She's very at ease when she leaves Colin and Pen alone in the garden, but she's got like this close eye on her here. What do you think about Ray's looks and what she knows or maybe suspects? You know what, Ray, the legend that she is, I think she's eyeing up her next paycheck. I think when she looks at Colin, she sees coins in her eyes and she's like, let it be. I'll invoice him later.
Yeah, I think she's a smart woman and very self-motivated. So we have that scene in 301 where you can kind of see blurry Ray with like her head cocked. She's watching Penelope watch Colin when he comes home.
She knows exactly what's going on.
Yeah, I think she knows from the start. I don't think that she even had a conversation with Penelope about her feelings. Maybe Penelope said, oh, Colin's going to help me find a husband. She's like, sure, okay. She just knows all along that there's this extra dynamic going on here.
Do you think she knows that Pen is Lady Whistledown?
Yeah, I think she knows everything.
The Featherington footmen know. So I'm assuming that probably the staff maybe knows. Maybe not Varley, because Varley would tell Portia, but maybe her lady's maid knows.
I think Ray has her eyes on the prize. She's a working woman. She's thinking about her career in the long run. She's thinking, if I make a fuss now, they're not going to be able to get together. They're going to be separated.
Right.
If I let it be, they're going to fall in love.
I will be a housekeeper.
She's eyeing what happens in episode 7.
Yeah.
She is going to the top of the fucking ladder. And she does. And I respect the hustle. Ray, an absolute queen.
Yeah.
And she sees her employer, or kind of her charge, Pen, earning money from having this knowledge and trading in gossip.
Yeah. Coins jingling all the way.
She's like, buy my silence, Colin.
Yeah.
Pay for it.
Yeah. That's what that side eye look is at the end of the scene.
But What else is going on in the town, Lecky?
So, as Ray side-eyes Colin, we find the Mondriches sadly sleeping alone. Wonder how they could possibly resolve this star-crossed love story. But like we discussed with Eloise and Colin earlier this episode, many other characters are also trying to fit into a certain mold in society, often for the first time and with mixed results. But while I love the Mondriches, one of my frustrations with their storyline this season relates to this specific issue of them needing to overcome the obstacle of sleeping in separate bedrooms. I think I would have preferred if they defied this expectation from the start to remind us that they are different and very much in love with each other, or just if they were given another challenge in general, because as Jen warns Alice at the modiste, the ton feeds on the nouveau and it gets ill-tempered when it is hungry. I wonder what their storyline would have looked like if Alice received more pushback as she tried to carve a place for herself in society, only to do so in a kind of memorable way, showing exactly what a strong and confident woman she can be.
Yeah.
That same line from Jen also sets up the later drama about Will needing to give up his bar in order to fit in. I'm sure we will discuss this more in future rewatches, but it doesn't make sense to me from a story standpoint that he would do this. Pen briefly abandons her dream and then realizes that she cannot live without it, whereas Will abandons his dream and has to learn to live without it, and for seemingly little reason. Because while Alice points out that Will has been absent during important family moments, we don't actually see Will spending time with his children after he gives up his bar, so this all falls a bit flat for me. To the writer's credit, there are actually more scenes where we see Will interacting with his children in the original scripts for season 3, but I still don't really enjoy the idea of him giving up his passion when Penelope, in comparison, did not need to do so.
Let a man have a bar.
Yeah.
Well, we've seen that Alice will be like a main character next season.
I guess knowing that season 4 is Ben's, I was hoping that they would revisit this issue of him giving up the bar and maybe he would reclaim it, and that would be a space where all, I don't know, just tying into the class differences and the class themes that we'll probably see in Benedict and Sophie's love story.
Also tying into Benedict returning to painting, his true love.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, so hopefully he does get back his bar, because it seems kind of sad that he was forced to give it up. But as Violet enters the modiste and makes a beeline for Bridgerton blue fabric, no pun intended.
Rest in peace, Edmund. We have to give a little shout out to the gentleman on horseback who rides by the modiste at the very beginning of the scene. I happened to be on hand when they shot this footage and recorded my own version of the same extra on horseback, so it's a bit surreal to see him pop up on the show. If you don't know what I'm talking about, we covered it in one of our crumbs. It was visible for everyone to see the filming. I hopped on down, a horse rode back and forth. It's a great time for horses.
Oh, if you're a Bridgerton superfan, by the way, that was filmed on Woburn Walk.
Yeah.
So if you want to go see the exterior of where they shot the modiste scene in this episode and in 307, it's a Woburn Walk.
Add it to the list. And that's also where Pen and Colin hooked up at the modiste.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a historical landmark these days.
Yeah.
But horses aside, it's time to head over to Bridgerton House because Colin's got a scheme up his sleeve as we find BC, H&G playing a card game in the Bridgerton garden. And our lovely listener, again, Moon Pie, welcome back, this is your episode after all, said, I'm sure the card game is full of Easter eggs. Do you guys have any thoughts on what they are? My theory is that Hyacinth I want to trade is an indication that she will swap seasons with Gregory. I think that's such a cool theory. And have season 8. Although it seems very early to lay these eggs. Like 10 years too early at the rate they're going.
I think it's an excellent point, actually, because it's worth calling attention to the fact that this episode was written by Sarah L. Thompson. She also penned episode 203, the episode featuring the foreshadowing-heavy Pall Mall game at Aubrey Hall. Many believe that this card game and the dialogue from Colin that comes immediately after contain foreshadowing for future seasons. Notably, Bennett is holding 4 cards, an indicator that season 4 would finally be his season. Interestingly, Greg is holding 7 cards, and it's very blurry, but it appears to me that Hyacinth is holding 8 cards. As they're playing, however, Gregory says that he'd like to trade, which suggests to me that they might swap Hyacinth and Gregory's seasons in the future, again overlooking the actual book order. And this actually makes sense to me because at that point we will have had 2 Bridgerton daughters' love stories in a row with Eloise and Fran, so they could mix things up by giving Gregory season 7.
That's a good thought, because you'd have had a sister, 3 brothers, 2 daughters, and then mix it up.
Yeah.
And I also think that it would be kind of nice. I've not really thought about it, to be honest, in terms of the implications of swapping them. I do think that Gregory's season would just be chaos. That would be hilarious for the final season. But then I think if, for example, Hyacinth is debuting or something like that, then it allows you to have those really nostalgic scenes for the final season where for the last time we're going to a Bridgerton presentation, we get to relive all those moments, but with like those cool parallels of Cancany coming out of Bridgerton House, seeing Colin at the house opposite, mirroring that scene that we've talked about before in 101. So that would be fun.
I also think that, I haven't read the book, but I think that Hyacinth rejects several marriage proposals. So I feel like if they delayed her until the last season, they could also play into that in the storyline a little bit, in like the seasons leading up to her season.
That'd be cool, because that's something that also happens to Eloise, but I can see them taking that from Eloise and giving that more to Hyacinth as like a funny little bit, because I think Eloise will be too sad. I think she's on a sadder trajectory, whereas you can play the comedy of that implication for Hyacinth.
Yeah.
But a footman slips into view, giving a subtle signal to Colin that a special guest has arrived. Who could it be? I can only imagine that the footman would also be jingling as he walks, because I assume that Colin has also bribed him just as much as he bribes Ray.
Yeah.
Perhaps the two...
They split it.
Listen, hear me out on this. Perhaps the two can fall in love and begin a new life on the back of Colin's desperation to see his bestie. Can you imagine it? Ray and the footman running away together. And all I can say to that is thank God for generational wealth, self-made businesswomen, and a vacancy in the Featherington barony. Otherwise, Colin would be destitute by the end of the season.
Because as Anthony says, he doesn't manage his money very well.
He doesn't. He spends it all on bribing people so he can hang out with his best friend.
Yeah.
And travelling all across Europe, only to realise that everything he's been looking for has been a very free pedestrian journey across the street.
Yeah.
Oh, I love this scene. I love this entire sequence so deeply, because we find Pen nervously waiting for Colin. She's very on edge about being back at Bridgerton House, knowing that Eloise could be lurking around any corner. My legend of this scene is the very judgmental footman who's standing there giving the heaviest side eye to them both. Maybe he's been bribed too. But Colin delightedly and incredibly obliviously strides towards her, declaring, "I have been eagerly awaiting your visit." Colin, darling, sit with it. Think about it. Feel what you're feeling. We're so nearly there, like. And Pen panics as she says she thought they were going to the market for yet another market scene, but Colin, with her hand on her back, leads her up the Bridgerton staircase. Gorgeous stuff. I love it. It's so domestic Polin, but so unaware. It's like the 207 staircase scene on steroids. Gorgeous. You know how much I love oblivious Colin. But how are they both looking?
So, Lessons Pen has another seafoam green look here, and also a little lilac necktie, which we immediately fell in love with when we saw it during the preview clip. And the lilac delicately wrapped around her neck visually suggests that, although she's committed to finding a husband, she's perhaps having difficulty suppressing her love for Colin now that they're in contact again, because as we know, lilac means first love. And she is also wearing her little mesh gloves. Now, this is a touch that was suggested by Nicola as a way for Pen to technically adhere to propriety, but still allow for intimate touches between Pen and Colin, which will help lead us into a key moment during the journal scene. And Colin has gone scandalously casual here, wearing a billowy white shirt, and is wearing a blue detailed waistcoat, which he later wears twice more in 304 and 308, both when he's having thoughtful moments of realisation about this exact pen, and in the case of 304, in his study. I especially love how Colin re-wearing his waistcoat ties him back to the Colin of this moment, which you could argue is the first plate shift before the true earthquake hits during their first kiss. Adorbs.
And as he's scandalously leading Penelope further into the house with a hand on her back, Colin assures her that they won't be interrupted as Violet, Fran, and Eloise are at the modiste and the rest of his siblings are playing cards. Colin remarks that Hy and Greg are highly competitive, again perhaps hinting at a potential mix-up with their season order, and that Ben will refuse to miss the spectacle. The latter to me seems like season 4 foreshadowing.
Spoiler alert.
I think that they will tease Ben might skip the masquerade only to hop on his horse and arrive for the event a bit late, which is what the leaks suggest too.
Spoilers.
That's so cool. And that leads us into, oh my god, it's such a gorgeous scene.
Yes.
I just love it so much.
So we are in the remarkable shade of blue scene. Earlier, Colin basically threw Penelope at Lord Wilding only to watch her crash and burn, so he's now decided the best person for her to practice on is himself. This is the stuff that rom-com dreams were made of. Chef's kiss writers, thank you.
And I think it's so sweet that he came up with this plan because, as you said earlier, Lecky, he could tell that she wasn't comfortable during the flirting scene. So after saying that, you know, it's time to go to real life, Pen, now he's brought her to where she used to feel most comfortable, the Bridgerton family drawing room. I mean, used to was really the key phrase there, Colin. But it's still really thoughtful of him. You can't deny it.
Yeah.
He leads her into the room and closes the door on the rest of the world. So it's just the two of them. And we know that boy is a fan of closing doors. But he's in hero Colin mode throughout this whole episode. But I also think it's such an earnest hero Colin mode.
And the energy and chemistry between them is just so good in the scene. I just really wish we had more of the lessons overall.
The dynamic is so much fun.
Yeah.
And it's so revelatory as well. And I love Colin's exasperated reaction to Pen when he says, we need a place to be alone. Like, come on, Penelope. It's so obvious, girl. And what follows is one of my absolute favourite scenes in all of season 3, Remarkable Shade of Blue, which we saw for the very first time. We actually have a whole reaction episode to this scene from February? March? It might have been March.
Yeah.
I can't even remember. And this was the first ever clip we saw of season 3. And I remember it so much being able to visually see what the season was going to be like, understanding the tone of their dynamic, the tone of their relationship, knowing that this was episode 2 most likely, so they'd already overcome the difficulty faced by 208. And then we had the beautiful music, which is so plinky plonky, so playful and sweet. We had the Viamond portrait, rest in peace, Edmund, but you're here in spirit. Many happy memories.
I think we also had speculated that there would be kind of a lessons element. So we were so pleased and so ecstatic to realize that she was testing out her flirting skills on him here.
Oh my God. I'll never remember you seeing that bit in the preview first.
I was like, she's flirting with him.
She's flirting with him. Go listen to it. It's so much fun.
And as we see them walk away, we see something that we didn't see in the Remarkable Shade of Blue clip, which was the back of the dress. Let's hear it for the back of the dress, guys.
It's a bloody gorgeous dress. It's one of my favourites.
Yeah, for sure.
Oh, such a lovely scene. And what I love most is that this is Colin creating a world for them. He literally says, imagine it with me, Pen. As a really sceptical Penelope adorably watches on. She's got her hands on her hips and she can't help being enamoured by him, despite saying that she'd given up on daydreaming in 301. And this is the Pen that can't help but love him, which is so crucial to shaping that story in 304. And I also think it's this lovely parallel to the scene in 305 where he shows her their home for the first time, and he does the same thing. He sketches out the world around them to create that for just the two of them.
Yeah.
And I love it because it's Polin creating their own world together. What we have as well is Colin still very much in control as the tutor, and he very conveniently presents himself as the only available suitor. What a shame no one else is around. And then as Pen is still sort of a little bit resistant to it, sort of dipping into that imaginary world, she quotes directly from the book, saying, deep inside, I know I can be clever and amusing, but somehow my character gets lost between my heart and my mouth, and I find myself saying the wrong thing, or more likely, nothing at all. And Colin says, forget all of that. Just imagine what you would say to me if I were a suitor. Don't think about how I'm going to take it. It's just me. Give us your best and I will be stoically unchanged. Nothing will absolutely shake the world as I know it. And Penelope saying that she struggles to reconcile those two parts of her and struggles to feel comfortable is a real reminder that she has always felt comfortable with him. It's like book Penelope. She's able to really be herself, be her bravest, boldest self because he's there, which is why he brought her to the Bridgerton house, not knowing that him being there as well was such a part of why she always had that affinity with their place. And also why she's able to really genuinely relax with him in this moment, relaxing ever so slightly too much as a little bit of the truth slips out, like what is going on.
So she tells him, your eyes are the most remarkable shade of blue, yet somehow they shine even brighter when you are kind. The idea that she thinks his eyes are kind gets me every time. It's so...
I'm going to start crying.
Sorry. So she snaps out of it and then says, I might say something like that if you were a suitor. And Colin's reaction is his brain glitches, his voice breaks, he downs his emotional support lemonade, and then Pen catches herself and kind of locks her emotions back away, slipping back into the Penelope she's supposed to be, his friend.
I wish we'd seen like a longer scene of this.
Yeah.
Because it pretty much was what was in the little clip we saw.
I love the way that Pen sort of catches herself and she like looks to the side and she's like, oh my fucking God. And she spent 2 seasons desperately hoping that he's going to pick up on her hints that she loves him. And this is the first time she's like, thank fuck this boy is oblivious as shit.
Yeah.
Well, Pen, he's losing the grip, love. So this is your last time you're going to get away with it. And what I love so much, and we talked about it in that episode in so much more detail, so if you want our in-depth thoughts on this scene, go watch that. But it's the fact that she loves him and sees that kindness within him. And that again ties into Book Penelope, who fell in love with him after the horse, but she loved him more and more and more every time she spent time with him because he was so kind to her. And this isn't a character who's known tons of kindness in her life. And I think what fractured her so much in 208 was thinking that he was cruel, as she said in 301. It was a moment where he was cruel, and it really broke a part of her to see that part of Colin. But here she's gone back to recognizing that he is kind and he is a good man, as she'll say in the end of 308. He's a very good man. And in this moment where she's being so honest and so open, it is that key part of him, which for Colin really hits him. He doesn't quite digest it fully, but when we think about the moment in 304 when Violet reminds him that his compassion and his ability to feel and his sensitivity is his strength as a character, I think that's why he feels so safe with Penelope as well, because she also recognizes that something like kindness in the space of toxic masculinity is such an important characteristic, such a different type of Regency hero.
Yeah, his kindness is an attractive trait to her.
Yeah.
Like, how moving. I love that.
And Colin, once again, looks like he's been hit by a freight carriage. And this is one of those world-shifting moments for him. Gorgeously played. I think it's like 206, where it's not quite there, but it is definitely a moment. And it is broken by the arrival of Eloise. So Colin hustles her the fuck out of there, accidentally leaving that shawl behind. I think everyone loves that moment where Pen runs under Colin's arm because she's so little. Yeah. And it's one of those moments where they're so in sync with one another. And he throws her in the Bridgerton study, not literally, fear not, and returns to the scene of the crime to act as if the world hasn't just been shaken by a tiny little redhead with a fondness for remarkable shades of blue.
And as you suspected, he was likely going back for that shawl.
He went back for the shawl.
Yep.
Who would have thought it? And that gives her just enough time. Yeah. And Colin's diversion gives Pen the perfect opportunity to do a little bit of snooping.
And stop right there. We all know by now that Pen is incapable of stopping herself from snooping, so I'm going to stop it for her. I promise we had every intention of getting our 302 rewatch into one episode, but too much happens. Too much happens. It was impossible. Our final edit for this episode ended up being 3.5 hours long, and I don't think we can do that to you. But worry not, dear listeners, you won't have long to wait for part 2 of our episode 2 rewatch. Hopefully this isn't a pattern going forward where we end up having the same number of podcast episodes per episode. I think the others might kill me if we end up with an 8-part rewatch of 308. But as for our 302 part 2, I promise you will not have long to wait. The episode will be with you within the week, and we will have answers to everything that's coming next. What will Penelope find in the games room? What will Colin think she found in the games room? What stark revelations will the cold light of the moon reveal? And will Pen's kiss curls ever get their wish? I know you already know, but pretend you don't, and we will find out soon. Until then, you can catch us on all the usual places. I'm doing this off the cuff, so I honestly can't remember them all. Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, What a Barb Pod. You can join us over at Patreon to discuss everything we talked about in this episode. You can find us there at What a Barb Pod. And until we see you again, which I promise will be so soon, hang on in there, Pen, hang on in there, Colin. Beans, will you do us the honour and sing us out?
Das violin. Do 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 do. Do 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 do. A Polin.